challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. Travis is supposed to be joining us. I know he's coming from work, so sometimes he gets a little hung up. So we'll just jump into it, and if he gets to join us, that'd be awesome. And if not, that's fine. We'll go ahead. So just to give you a little, I know I gave you a little bit of background in the email that I sent you, but just to give you a little bit more. Travis, Jordan, and I started this podcast. We're all high school coaches. They both wrestled for me in high school. They played lacrosse at Richfield, and now Travis coaches wrestling at Richfield with me, and Jordan's a head coach at New Rochelle High School in lacrosse, and Travis coaches with him. Well, he was supposed to last year, but they didn't have a season because of COVID. So hopefully this year. So, we wanted to really just, we believe success leaves clues. And so, we wanted to tap into people who are, doing some successful stuff, especially in the world of athletics, and find out, what your secret sauce is. What are the things that make you stand out from others, and share that with our audience in hopes that they can pick up some clues and things, and they can apply it to their own game plan and, reach those same elite levels.
Sweet. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. So that's our focus. So, we'll just start with asking the basic questions like, how did you get started in racing? I mean, you come from, I would venture to guess that the majority of people who are in NASCAR and the race series are not necessarily coming from Connecticut, New York, the tri-state area, right? Where was the interest that you started originally from? How'd you get interested in cars?
Okay.
And here's Travis. Let me let him in.
That's definitely the area of expertise we're talking about today.
Yeah. So I just started talking with Anthony and just, said, let's start at the beginning. How did you get into racing? Growing up in Connecticut, where it's not probably the hotbed of racing. What was your first, thing that piqued your interest, and how'd you get involved?
So basically, I didn't know we were starting. I'm sorry. So basically,
let's go. We're free flowing.
I love it.
Yeah.
So really, I mean, the biggest thing to start it all is what you pointed out. Where I grew up and where you guys are from in Ridgeville, Connecticut, I'd say the tri-state area as a whole, it's racing isn't as common as, say, down in the Southeast, where actually I live now, just toward 20 minutes south of Charlotte, North Carolina. And I think what inspired it was my parents just so happened to be the one in maybe 20 people in our hometown that watched racing. And I grew up watching all the NASCAR races on the weekends with them. And my first race as a fan was actually the 2012 Daytona 500. But flashback before that, even I was racing go-karts with my brother and my sister, and we were little. And it wasn't anything crazy or fancy. We didn't even own the go-karts. We just go to the rental kart track where you pay $40 and you run 3 10-minute races or whatever it is. And I was pretty good at that. Never knew if it would translate at all. And as you guys know, I continued playing a lot of stick and ball sports and wasn't racing, which in addition to the fact that I didn't come from a hometown or state where racing's super popular, I didn't race my whole career. A lot of the competitors of mine have raced their whole lives, and that was kind of the only thing they've ever done, or their parents race and they were kind of brought up in the sport. So definitely an unusual story for myself personally, but I did play lacrosse at Richfield High School for 1 year. And after freshman year of high school, I decided I want to try racing. I love watching it. I was good at the go-kart thing. I'd like to see if it translates. And I actually found a guy in New York who had what's called a legend car. It's a small scale race car that's kind of the entry level to oval racing. And I did that. I ran about 12 races in that. And it was actually the end of the year up north. So the season was over, but down here in North Carolina at Charlotte Motor Speedway, they have a small quarter-mile track where they have the Winter Heat Series. So we traveled all the way down here for that. And that was my first time coming here. Never knew I'd start living here on my own. But when I did that, I was actually picked up by Refocusing Racing, who owns a development team for young drivers in what are called late model stocks, which is the first stock car racing division. It's more regional. And I did that for 2 years before getting the opportunity to drive for my childhood hero, Dale Earnhardt Jr. So that was pretty crazy. And that year in particular was probably where I started to make a name for myself and move on through the ranks to where I'm at now, which is the national level, driving for Richard Childress Racing, which is arguably the most well-known team in the sport and well-respected organization. So it's been a phenomenal journey. And the craziest part is that was only 6 years ago when I started. So come a long way in a very short amount of time. Just been very blessed and have great people around me supporting me, and just try to make the most out of every opportunity I've had.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's an awesome, as you said, very quick, very rapid progress. It's amazing. Let me ask you a quick question. When you first kind of got into it while living in Ridgefield, and you kind of met the guy in New York, and you started doing that, and everybody else is in this area was, as you said, playing stick and ball sports. What was the reaction from your friends and from people that you knew to you kind of going into a world that most people didn't really know that well, in this area?
That's a great question. It's kind of hard to answer because there was a lot of different reaction. I'd say there are some people who, or the majority of people, just it was so different and just a whole nother world that they knew nothing about. I didn't even at the time. I mean, at that point, I knew hardly anything about it. So it was even hard for me to explain, obviously. But I think coming from a town where not only are stick and ball sports very common, but our schools in particular are extremely competitive and have a great resume competing in state finals and stuff like that. So it was just so different from what everyone was used to. And it's kind of funny because, they always say, right, your true friends are your true friends who support you, whatever you do, and this and that. And I definitely found out who my true friends were at that point in time because of those who could care less about it, didn't support me, thought I was pursuing something that was irrelevant or not serious, or even some name calling, or I should just say stereotyping the industry, which I've come to learn is it's way different than what a lot of people expect it is, as a lot of other things. I mean, there's a lot of sports I know nothing about, but when I know nothing about something, I like to be educated on it and learn about it, not make assumptions. So it's been kind of cool to be climbing the ranks and get to this level. I'm nowhere near where I want to be yet, but I've accomplished a lot and gotten further than I ever would have imagined. So it's kind of cool to look back on those days and think, I didn't even know where I was going to end up, but everyone who thought it was something insignificant, it's pretty cool to look back on that and see where it took me.
Well,
There's gotta be a little bit of like, a little bit of that, like, yeah, right. Thought it was nothing, but now I'm doing pretty good, man.
I'll say growing up in the same town and even knowing your family, the way I do, it has been nonstop. That's what he's going to do since the second you picked it up. I remember when I first talked to your sister about it, she was like, oh, no, he's legit. Like, it was like you had just gone on your first couple races, and she was like, no, this is real. This is real deal stuff. So you're right. You had that support right off the bat, which is great. So I guess one thing I'm curious about is, what did you have to change about your day-to-day life, right? Because you grew up doing nothing to do with racing. You didn't really have a ton of knowledge about it. But then once you started really diving in, once you got picked up by your sponsors, did you put school on the back burner? Did you have to do more of a homeschooling? What happened with your workouts, your diet? How and when did you really turn it on? You really flip that switch?
There's a lot of ways that my lifestyle changed when I started racing. I'd say once I realized, first off, the first time I strapped into a race car, I discovered my passion, and that's number one, because as many people know, if once you find your passion, it's just, it's hard to even explain the feeling. It's really just, that's all you can think about. Right. And for me, I'm a pretty anxious person, and my mind's always going super fast, no pun intended, literally. But when I put the helmet on, it's kind of like I'm able to flush everything out. And it's just that thing that I just love to go do what I do, and I enjoy it. And it's just so fun being able to focus on one thing and one thing only, and that's going out there to win races. So in order to do that, of course, a lot had to change. And at that point in time, in particular, when I was at Ridgefield High School playing lacrosse, I obviously had to quit playing lacrosse, which, if I wasn't racing, I would 100% probably would have played and tried to go to college and play lacrosse and all that, because I did really enjoy it. Probably not my passion, but my favorite sport out of everything I had played at the time. So that was number one. Number two, because of that, I also had to transition to online school because I was traveling so much. That was probably where it became very challenging socially because I wasn't seeing friends of mine every day or interacting with others. I was literally just doing online school on a computer at home every day. Went through 3 years of high school like that, graduated, and came with an uncommon, I guess, route by actually trying to put myself through college as I raced because, if something did happen or it didn't work out, I wanted to have a backup plan. And even if it did work out, I knew I could apply the things I learned in school to racing. So living here just near Charlotte, North Carolina, I attended UNC Charlotte and been working on my engineering degree, which this year at this level of competition, there's been so much traveling and so much more that goes into it. I've actually had to put that on hold. But I'm proud to say that I've made it 3 years. So I don't have that much left at all if I ever want to or need to go back. And I will say it definitely has helped me as a person, as a competitor, and apply it to my career. So a lot changed. But like I said, instead of completely dropping the ball on school, at this point in time, as you mentioned, you kind of have to prioritize things, right? These opportunities aren't always going to be there for me, and school will be. And I knew to focus. I care about school, and I didn't want to not focus 100% on that because I'm focusing on racing, and I'm definitely not going to not focus 100% on my opportunity.
Don't worry. It's not mom and dad here. You don't have to sell us on your commitment to school. What about mentally as like a competitor going from, wow, I'm starting to love this to now it's time to win and train like a winner, compete like a winner, flipping that switch when you do put the helmet on. How did that change for you? Because I know it does for everyone a little differently.
Hey, Trav, can I just ask you?
Yeah.
I want to piggyback your question with another question. I mean, it was just same thing Travis said you had mentioned earlier. You put that helmet on. A lot of sports, wrestling, football, it's almost two personas sometimes, right? You have this off-field persona, and then you have to kind of flip that switch from being Clark Kent into Superman. Do you have that same mentality, that same mindset? Does that happen to you when you get in there and put that helmet on?
Absolutely. I think I couldn't even really say like I know exactly what changes about me. All I know is when I put the helmet on and I strap into the car, everything goes away, and I almost become like one with the car, as weird as it sounds. But because in racing, one thing you learn, especially at this level of competition, everything's so different, right? Like you don't just go out there and drive a car. Not everyone's car is the same. You actually have to make chassis adjustments and tire adjustments, stuff like this to make the car handle better. So anyways, when you become one with the car, it really allows you to focus on what the car needs as far as an adjustment to be better and what you need to maximize the performance out of your race car. And that translates into you physically as a driver. One race in particular this year, it got up to 140 degrees inside the car, and we raced for 3.5 hours. So when you experience that wearing a 3-layer fire suit much more, and you lose approximately 10 pounds of water weight a race, you really have to focus on your diet, your nutrition, and of course your exercise. I think racing in general is very challenging to train for because the impact it has on your body throughout a race is very difficult to replicate. So you kind of just train very diversely, and we do a little bit of everything, which is how a lot of modern athletes train nowadays for everything. You want to be well-rounded, of course, no matter your profession. But in racing, that's definitely emphasized.
Yeah.
Could you take us through like a week of training so we could kind of get a feel of what race car drivers cross training is like?
Yeah, so this year has been totally different because of COVID. Obviously, I've been in a gym and I've gotten some things to work out at home, like a set of TRX cables, and I actually got those adjustable Bowflex weights, which are awesome because I'm a big free weight dumbbell kind of guy. But on top of that, cardio is huge and heat training. So in the summer, going on a run in a hoodie and sweatpants is great. Practice and following that up with some weight training and switching it up regularly every 4 weeks. You kind of bring in a whole new routine and change up your training. But it's always a mix of cardiovascular training, weight training, and strength training, and just overall muscle and cardiovascular endurance is the biggest thing because that's the biggest thing you fight inside the car for sure.
Lots of heat too. Lots of heat.
The heat is amazing. The 140 degrees. I mean, That's amazing. So, one of the questions I had, referencing something you said earlier, what's the learning the car, right? You say become one with the car, but learning the mechanics of the car and the chassis of the car and all the adjustments you need to have. And I understand that you have a crew that works with you and you have a team, but how much learning did you have to do to kind of really understand the nuances of the machine that you're becoming part of?
A lot goes into it for sure, because I think what makes it very challenging is the fact that when you come across a certain problem, or there's a, just say, for example, in NASCAR and oval asphalt racing, right? You have four corners, two ends of the racetrack. And if you're struggling with the balance of the race car and just in one certain spot on that racetrack, there can be 10 adjustments you can make to fix one thing. So the hardest part is narrowing it down to what one adjustment is going to be the best to fix that issue. And that's where your crew chief and your engineer come in to help figure out what adjustment they're going to make. But you as the driver, over time and experiencing, sometimes you tell them to make an adjustment, it's not the right one, but that's just a part of learning, right? That's the only way you're going to know is to experience it. And that's what I'd say that when I was racing late models, I learned a lot about, because obviously I had hardly any racing experience, and all those people I worked with taught me how to feel those things and what the car needs to go faster. Because when you come in with no experience, you kind of just, it sounds funny, but you kind of out there making laps, and it's like, how do you know what you need to go faster? So that's what those levels are there for, to teach drivers what they need in the race car to go faster. And then when you get to this level, I mean, the changes are so minuscule. It's spectacular what can determine the outcome of a race when it comes to 1 pound of air pressure in a tire or something like that.
Did you find that it was because you started out with such inexperience? Did you find it was easy to give up a bit of that trust? Because I could see how someone who grew up always building their own engine, always making their own adjustments, could be a little nitpicky and not trust their teammates and their crew. Do you feel like you have like an easier way of just like the guys around you are there with your team, like no, everyone's there with you? Because it's tough for me growing up playing team sports, when I can see the guy performing next to me, right? I can look over and see the guy on defense or offense, right? He's playing right next to me and we can work together. I can feel that trust where they make adjustments for you and then you have to go trust their thing and take what they did with you. Is that kind of something that you had to learn, or was it easier because you had less experience? It was kind of built into you.
No, 100%. It was very much so like that. Part of it's the fact that you haven't experienced things, right? So you kind of don't really know what the car is going to do. When I was starting the race, the crew chief would make an adjustment and I just kind of go drive it and see what it did. Well, now at this level, I have a better idea of what adjustments do, and maybe even telling the crew chief what adjustment I need. But like you said, you kind of have that uncertainty just because you almost just don't know any better, and you're kind of just trying to feel it out on your own. And one thing that I even have to remind myself to this very day is just to go with my gut feeling, because usually the first thing that comes to mind or that you think you need is the right way to go. Because I'm an overthinker. I mentioned before, I'm anxious. I overthink stuff, and it's very easy, especially under caution, when the pace slows down and you're kind of just to come over the radio and you almost start stepping over yourself and rethinking things you need. But I always try to remind that my gut feeling is usually the right thing.
Yeah. So, to Travis's point about the team, and there's, the saying, right? There's a saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, get a team. Well, you want to go far and fast. But talk to us a little bit about the relationship that you have to have with your team, and how do you, because there's on every team we have to have trust, but to be real, in your sport, it's a matter of life and death, right? I mean, if Travis's lacrosse coach makes a bad call, they might lose a bad game. But in your case, if your team doesn't do the things they need to do the correct way, or you don't do the things the correct way, it could be an injury, it could be death. We've seen that in that sport. So talk to us a little bit about how you build a relationship and what kind of relationship you have with the teams that you work with.
Yeah, it's a huge part of success at this level and in this sport in general. A lot of people don't realize how much of a team effort it is because although there's one driver driving the car, there's a whole team of people behind the car working in the race shop, preparing the car, and then a whole different group of people bringing it to the track, and a whole another group of team members that are pitting the car and changing the tires because the people that do that on a pit stop aren't the same people that are on the pit box, on the engineering software or crew chiefing. We probably have over 10 people at the track a weekend. Actually, it's probably 12 or so, I think, just on our team alone. So there's a lot of people aside from me behind me that have my back and I've got their back. And if they, if something goes wrong on a pit stop, we have a slow pit stop. I don't get mad at them because it's just it's the same thing as me making a mistake on the track, and they're not going to get mad at me for that. We win and lose together. And that's probably one of the most important things that stands out to me this season in particular is working with RCR and the team of people I've had the pleasure of working with. We all know that we all want to win as bad as one another, but we win and lose together. So when something doesn't go our way, or there's a mechanical issue, we're all just focused on the next week and doing our homework to get better. And I think one of the most exciting parts about that, though, is with that team effort, something that's unique about racing is there's not one winning team and one losing team. There's one winning team and 39 losing teams. So it makes it very rewarding when you do find success together as a team because you have to beat so many others and so much goes into it, as with other sports. But like I said, the odds are just different. So it's a very unique experience.
So just to follow up on the team concept, because I think one of the things that's really unique about your sport is you have other drivers that are part of the large team, right? And they're your teammates and they're your competitors. And I know that one of your early NASCAR races, I believe you came in second to one of your teammates. How does that dynamic work? Because that's not common in most of the sports that we're familiar with.
Yeah, it's very unique, and I think when it becomes challenging at times is when it comes down to championships, right? You see drivers that are driving for the same team, and of course there's a different group of team members on each car along with those drivers, but when it comes down to winning a championship, it can get challenging because everyone's kind of focused on themselves at that point, and they want, at the very least, they want to finish 1-2 in the points, or even in a single race. They want to, if there's two teams on that team, so to speak, or two drivers, they want to finish first and second. But when it comes down to racing each other and determining who finishes first and who finishes second, it can get hairy and a bit interesting for the team owners. Because I think on the track, I've been a part of it as a driver. When your helmet's on, you're not thinking about who that is beside you or that you're racing side by side with. I mean, your job is to win. Or get as great a finish as possible, obviously. So I think when it comes down to a win, there is no teammate on the last lap. That's how I've gone about my career so far. And everyone I've worked with has had that same mentality, fortunately. But like I was saying before, when it comes down to championships and stuff, it can get even more difficult because that's the ultimate goal, right? So you kind of have to just see the way races play out and work together to the best of your ability. But sometimes when it comes down to crunch time, it's a little bit of, it can become a little bit of a free for all, and your Monday morning team meeting can be interesting.
So it sounds like there could be some stories there, but we won't push you on it.
No, that stuff stays inside the Monday morning team meeting. So you were just mentioning, like, the overall goal, obviously winning, and it's a long season, right? You got tons of races. And I think I read at one point you took 9 out of 14. You were top 10. I think in maybe 2018. You had a great year, like one of your best years, I think. Talk to us about your goal setting, how you look at the big picture of your season, your year, and then how do you break it down for each month, each race, maybe even each morning? What are you waking up? If you can even break it down, a lot of our listeners love to hear the real minute details about how you goal set. Is it on your wall? Is it a journal? Just kind of take us through from big picture to small picture, if you could.
Yeah, so I'll start with this season in particular. I definitely had a check sheet coming into the year, and I will say a lot of those things changed because with our sport after the pandemic started, we eliminated practice and qualifying, and I've only run a partial schedule this year. I've actually run 19 of 33 races because we didn't have enough sponsorship funding to sign on for a full year, which that kind of changed my approach to the season because instead of focusing I'll just put an example out there. In some races, it's better to settle for fourth than risk crashing for second or third or even the win when you're racing for points and you're focused on a championship at the end of the season because of the way the points add up. But for me, I'm not in the points chase. I'm not racing for a championship for myself. So I pretty much have approached every race and just try to go out and win or just get as great a finish as we possibly can. And that has, of course, throughout the year, I've been working on my checklist, which was in the beginning, the first item was to qualify and finish top 10 and didn't have qualifying, so never got to do that. My first race of the year was the only one I actually had practice in qualifying. But because I only ran the first of one of the first five. But the rest of the season, it was just came down to the races. And now that NASCAR has implemented stages in the events, my goal was to, finish in the top 3 in a stage or top 5 in a race. Then top 3 in a race. And I accomplished all those things this year. And I just approached it one by one. Some came sooner than expected. Some things came later than expected, as might happen in life. But I did accomplish all of them, fortunately. And having that check sheet to wake up every morning to and look at and reset my goals after a weekend. Maybe you crash, don't have a good weekend. You just got to kind of sleep it off, wake up the next day and refocus on the next week. And that all pertains to training, nutrition, just everything that goes into a race and working with your team. That kind of goes back to the team thing too. We all had these goals together and knew what we wanted to accomplish this year. And I'd say my ultimate goal is to be a Cup Series champion. And where I'm currently at my career, the Cup Series is the next step. So I'm right below the highest level of NASCAR. And this is still very much the professional level because NASCAR has 3 national levels or national series, I should say. And this is the middle, the second highest of the 3. So to be a Cup Series champion is my ultimate goal. But because I didn't run a full-time season this year, my short-term goal is to go run full-time in this series next year and ideally win a championship and move up from there. And then try to work towards that ultimate goal. But those all start with those daily, weekly, and monthly goals that I set for myself personally and professionally.
Do you have a good reset process? I know you talked about, you have a bad crash, you have a bad race, and then you got to wake up and reset. Is it just kind of like once you're up, it's a new day, or do you have kind of like a mental process that you go through, any particular way that you reset?
Yeah, well, I should record myself saying this because I always answer this question the same way, but I forget this when I go through it. But the biggest thing for me is to, I always say, right, if you make a mistake or something doesn't work out, I'll just start with making a mistake because everyone hates to make a mistake, right? Especially when it costs you a shot at the win or something like that. But for me, being a rookie in this series and moving up really quickly and having limited career experience, not just experience in this series, one thing a lot of people remind me, and I need to do a better job reminding myself, is that without making those mistakes, you don't learn. Without that happening to you, you're not even going to know. And you might make that mistake much later in your career when you can't afford to. So to get those mistakes out of the way earlier and just a lot of the times, fortunately this year, any mistake I've made has usually been for me pushing almost too hard and having to pull the reins back a little bit and just kind of tone it down. And when you look back on it, you're disappointing yourself for doing that, but it's better than pushing 90%, not making those mistakes and knowing you left stuff on the table rather than pushing as hard as you possibly can and maybe going too far and knowing the next time not to put yourself in that situation or make that same mistake twice. So I would try to remind myself that that's how you learn. That's how you get better in anything in life, not even just sports or as an athlete. So like I said, I might have to record myself on that one for the next time something like that happens.
We've got you. That'll be clipped.
So I want to just follow. So we talk a lot about with our athletes about the ability to focus. And I would imagine that in race car driving, focus is paramount, right? I mean, you've got to stay, I'm working with a boxer right now, right? So we're focused on him staying focused for 3 minutes. Or, we might work with, a tennis player who's got to stay focused for the time of a volley and serve back and forth. You guys are running around that track for hours at a time. What training do you do outside of being in the car and driving? What training do you do? What mental preparation do you do that allows you to really hone in and get better at that focus?
Well, one thing that a lot of drivers do, which I have yet to pick it up just because the way this year's been in particular, and the apartment I live in, I don't have space yet, but bike riding and road cycling and mountain biking, because the problem with running is usually when I run, I'll follow it up with some other type of exercise, because you almost can't run, or I can't at least run long enough and keep my heart rate high enough to accurately represent being in the car. And because usually the people who can run for tremendous distances can keep their heart rate really regulated. But one thing a lot of people have to acknowledge is in the race car, I think the lowest average I had all year was about 150 beats per minute. And that's my lowest average all year. So to maintain 150 or more beats per minute for hours on end is some people would consider dangerous, right? If you're not trained to do that. So that's where the cycling comes in, because it's a little bit easier almost to keep that heart rate higher, go a longer distance, and represent that long duration, that endurance your body needs to have. And that's not something you do every day. Like I said, you mix that in with your strength training and some of these other things. And the heat training is the biggest thing, because that's what really starts to kick your heart rate up on top of the high adrenaline situations you're in. But racing at speeds of upwards and over 200 miles per hour, inches apart from a bunch of other cars on the track, while being that fatigued, you have to be prepared for that. So the heat training, the endurance training, and the just being used to having your heart rate higher and almost being able to bring it back down, because that can be an issue at times, is when you get caught in a hairy situation, your heart rate spikes. And when you're up to pace, you can't get it back down usually unless a caution comes out and you can kind of relax again. So that's been one of the biggest things I've worked on, is almost high intensity interval training, and in between a certain set, focusing on that cool down and tracking it on my heart rate monitor and seeing how low I could get it before I start the next set.
Right. Do you use any techniques that, like for example, we might use concentration grids, right? So we'll get this grid and has all the numbers on it, and you kind of do the speed grip, so it focuses you for the amount of time that you have to be there. And then we put the people in pressure situations around that. Do you use any kind of techniques where you're focusing your mind outside of the stimulated body, techniques?
Yeah. So before I was unable to go into a gym this year. Last year I was in a gym where we had a heat room, and it actually was no humidifier, so it'd be like 115 degrees of dry heat, and it's just horrible. But while you're in there, you do things just like that, some sort of concentration game, or I forget what it's called, but the reaction lights, or the fit lights, I think they're called, where you tap them and you can organize them in different patterns, and just stand in one place and try to do it as fast as you can. And doing that in the heat room, or coming in and out of the heat room, doing that in combination with exercise is difficult, right? Because you're so tired, you want to just sit down, but to have to go stand up and try to focus and do something like that is great practice for staying engaged while you're racing.
And Travis touched on it a little bit before, Trav, when you said about refocusing, right? So my question is, you're in a race and you make a mistake, right, on the track, whether it's, you bump a car, or you maybe hit the wall, whatever it is. Do you have any triggers that allow you to kind of quickly get back? Sometime in training, we use the visualization of traffic lights. So, when you're in a green traffic light, you're in your body posture is big and huge, and your language is confident. And then you make a mistake, and you may slip into like a yellow light where there's a caution, and I got to figure out how do I get back? Do you have a plan, or something that, whether it's something on your dashboard that makes you kind of visual spot and you kind of trick back? How do you do that instantaneously? I would imagine in that sport too.
It's definitely tough. And that's one of the hardest things in racing, because when you run 300 miles, or in the Cup Series, 500 miles, when you make a mistake, right, you got a long way to go. So you kind of just have to focus on, there's hopefully, depending on when you made that mistake, there's plenty of laps to make up for it, or make up for that mistake, redeem yourself. And you just gotta, there's actually a military veteran visited RCR in the beginning of the year for the season kickoff luncheon we had. And he said one of his sayings was FIDO, which is FIDO, forget it, drive on. And that is the most applicable thing for a lot of things in life, especially racing, because of drive, the fact that the word drive is in there. And that is so true, because when you make one of those mistakes, if you harp on it, you're, like you guys said, you're not going to perform at your peak physically or mentally, of course. So you need to overcome that and just literally forget it and keep driving and just try to make up for it. Or as I said before, some of those mistakes, if it didn't take you out of the race, you got to know you learned from it. So maybe later in the race, you're in that same situation racing for the win, and not to make that mistake or put yourself in that situation again. So that's probably one of the biggest things is that I've learned, is to forget it and drive on, learn from it, move on.
Yeah. It's quick reaction, because right, you can make that mistake and you don't get a pit where you could have that 10-second, or hopefully faster than 10 seconds for a pit, I'm sure. But you don't have that, hey, it's time to pit, or the caution flag, where you can kind of restart and then you can go back out. You might have 10 more laps before you can get a chance to talk to your crew chief, right? Or, it's definitely got to be a quick thing. And I'm sure your learning curve is getting faster and faster, but, to come from where you were even a year ago to where you are now is very impressive. And you like you said, you're learning quickly. You're adapting as soon as you can to everything, because you don't have the time to waste like you would on the track. So that's great.
So this is kind of just popped in my head just now. There, obviously there's the physical aspect of your sport, right? There's the mental aspect of sports, and we generally use this general term, right? That sports is 90% mental and 10% physical. And then you also have the equipment, you have the car. So maybe this is a hard question to answer, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. If you had to kind of rank, what's the most important thing for a racer? Is it the machine? How Lance Armstrong could say it's not about the bike. Is it about the bike? Is it about the physical conditioning? Is it about the mental aspect? I know it's a combination of all, but if you had to break it down, gun to your head, how would you prioritize that?
Well, obviously the ideal combination is the best driver and the best car. Yeah. That's a given. But as you said, to break it down in order from, I'll say, greatest to least, the first would be the driver, for a lot of reasons. That kind of is broken into its own category, mentally, physically. But the biggest thing that stands out to me when you say that is the best driver can take not the best car and still win, or finish, or be competitive with a car that's maybe not as good as someone else's. So that's definitely number one. And then the car is next, probably. If you have a fast car and you've got, the driver in it, you're able to that's a winning combo. But I'd say a third thing is the strategy. At this level, running these longer races, and of course the Cup level, strategy is a huge part of these races to put yourself in contention and gain track position. And when you have, that is crucial to setting yourself up for the end of the race, because sometimes you'll be running 10th, but it's on purpose, right? Because when the pit cycles, or maybe you pit early and you're in 15th, but when everyone else pits, you're going to be leading or something like that. So that's something as a driver, sometimes you don't even realize when it's happening. You'll just, come down pit road and then you're thinking, wait a minute, why am I 15th? And I'd say the team side of things that we talked about earlier with trust, when that happens to me, I usually trust my crew chief has a plan for us. Sure enough, we end up, being in the top 3 or something when everything cycles out. So I'd say driver, car, and strategy in order, greatest to least, or how I'd break racing down and how you head into a race.
I love it. I use the term all the time that life is not really a talent game. It's a strategy game. Obviously, if you have the talent and you have the strategy, then we've got world class, right? But that's great that you broke it down that way. I love that. That's phenomenal.
I wasn't even thinking about the whole strategy of where to position yourself. And it's kind of like a horse race, right? Like you have someone who wants to break late, who rides in the back of the pack and then breaks late. But you guys have the whole, I can pit now, and you're kind of almost playing. Do you gotta sometimes end up playing games and like tricking other drivers, other teams, being like, oh, he's gonna pit now, and then you don't pit, or like, oh, Anthony always pits late. You go and you pit early all of a sudden, and they have no idea where you're at. And a lot of that, obviously, like you said, is probably your crew chief. How much of that is pre-thought out, or is it kind of on the fly during the race, or do you guys have like exactly where you're gonna hit everything?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because when it comes to strategy, the only thing we know going into a race is how many sets of tires we get. And based on previous year's notes and watching film, we know, of course, how much the tires are going to wear, and when how long the tires are going to last as far as their durability. We also know the length of a fuel run, how long you could run without running out of gas. But with the stages NASCAR has now, we have 3 stages in a race. So the first might be to lap 45, then lap 90, and then it might be a race to lap, 200 from there or something. So the final stage, you usually can't make it on fuel. So you always know you have to stop in there, and you can run the first 2 stages without pitting. But that's all easier said than done, because one thing racing's taught me, as an overthinker, I'm a little bit of a planner, not the most spontaneous person, but I'd say racing has made me more spontaneous, because so much happens on the fly and you can't go into a race with a plan. And I'd say 2020 in racing has taught me a lot too, because I'm a rookie in the series. I'm new to the cars. I've gone to a lot of new tracks, and I've had 0 practice and 0 qualifying. So you literally just send it into turn 1 with complete uncertainty as to how your car is going to handle, what a competitor might do, and just it's crazy. So in racing too, when someone might crash and a caution comes out, and it could blow your entire strategy, or it could open up the door for you to use some unique strategy to put yourself in a better position and finish better than you probably would have otherwise. So there's definitely some crazy things that happen. And I would just say that you kind of have a general plan or a plan A, and then the rest of it is just, if the plan A doesn't work, you got to come up with something on the fly, because you can't plan anything. And that's why I think it's probably made me a more spontaneous person, being used to things not going according to plan.
That's good. And it builds more trust too with your team, right? Because your crew chief comes in, he's like, hey, this is what we're gonna do, and you're like, all right. And if it works, let's run with it, right? And your crew's obviously ready to go because they got the same headphones too, so everyone knows, get on the same page. This is what we're doing. Let's run with it. And then you're like full gear, just let's do it. Hit pedal to the metal, let's get it.
So Anthony, most successful athletes, whether it's LeBron James, Michael Phelps, 2 that come to mind right away, they use visualization as a way to prepare, for themselves for their competition. You just talked about how things are so uncertain. Do you use visualization? And if you do you use, some people just use the positives of visualization, right? They'll focus on me winning. They won't necessarily focus on all the things that can go wrong in their race or in their competition. How do you do it if you do visualization?
Well, it kind of depends, right? I'd say this year, as we just talked about, the uncertainty of the season has led me to rely on, we use a lot of simulation, and that's opened up the door for me to learn a lot more heading into a race, or as much as I could without literally being on the track in real life. So I actually have a SimSeats driving simulator in my apartment, and I use iRacing, which is a simulation program on the computer. It's a consumer product. Anyone can get on it. And it's the closest thing to real life. So you guys could get on it, and it might be the closest you'll ever get to driving a race car, and it's very accurate. So for me to have that at my disposal whenever I want to hop on is a great training tool to get better and hone my skills and develop racecraft. And then, of course, at this level of competition, we have the manufacturer simulator. So Chevrolet sends me to their simulator, which is full motion, and you got to strap in, put your seatbelts on and everything. It's pretty nuts, but it's so accurate, right? And like I said, without going to the track in real life, it not only gives me a real visualization of as
Yeah.
far as my lift points, my braking points, and all that. But since it's motion, you could feel the bumps. And what that does is give me more confidence. And when I go home at night after the simulator session, I kind of am thinking about the race and a situation I might be in. Because now that I have an idea of what the track's going to look like or feel like, I can think, oh, when I'm beside this guy through this bump, it might be a little sketchy, or I know I need to be in this position, if I'm racing for the lead. So I 100% do that. And I always think back on more successful races of mine, what I did to put myself in those positions, because even though all the tracks are totally different, there's, success at each track isn't that much different, although the track characteristics are. So to just kind of focus on things I've done well, the team's done well, and rely on studying film. They have onboard cameras we watch, so you can see not only drivers' hands, but we can even look at data and see where a certain car is faster than another. And usually if someone had an onboard camera and they won the race, you really focus on that one, and watching the broadcast back and just seeing how people attack the race, different strategies, and going back through notebooks from my teammates who drove in years past. So a lot goes into it. And after I do all that and kind of build some confidence before heading to a track for the first time, I put myself in their shoes and think about what they did to execute. And then, of course, when you go to the racetrack, what you want to do is win. So I'd say the motivation of that feeling you get when you win, and remembering how amazing it feels or has felt and since your last win, that's kind of what drives you every time you're at the track, is you just want to experience that again.
So something very interesting about racing, especially, you get maybe a little bit like the fight game or boxing, but sponsorship. And you were talking about how happy you or lucky you are that you get your Chevy sponsor to bring you to your full simulator with the bumps and everything. How important is that sponsorship to get, and then to have one that's truly behind you? And just talk about your sponsorship and where it's been able to take you in your elevating your game.
It's been huge. I'd say number one is, of course, it's my personal sponsorship I've had, and the new partnerships I've developed this year especially has made it possible for me to compete for a team like Richard Childress Racing, and driving for a team like that, to have Chevrolet and the manufacturer's support to allow us drivers to go get on the simulator and allow us to review data and work with our teammates and just get better on and off the track has been a huge advantage, of course. And for me personally, like I said, all my personal deals have allowed me to climb the ranks and continue to grow. And some of those companies are smaller and they sponsor 1 or 2 races a year, and they love it. I love it. And it's always a great time. And there's others that can do, a whole bunch of races, but it doesn't really matter. That doesn't really matter as much as the fact that they all believe in me, and that means a lot to me. And that drives me to succeed and make them proud, and, just bring them back home trophies and sometimes some sheet metal like you see behind me when a race doesn't go so well.
Is that what that is? I thought those were billboards.
No.
So you just hit on a point. You said they believe in me, right? And so that leads to my next question. Obviously, you said that you found your passion, and racing is your passion. I would guess that a lot of guys you're competing against, racing is their passion. So what do you believe is your competitive advantage in the sport? Tough question, but
yeah, it's a tough question. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I usually don't speak about those things, because I don't talk about myself really, but I think it's good to acknowledge traits that have helped you, because obviously there's things you need to acknowledge that aren't good so you can make them better, and things that are good that you need to continue to improve on. And I'd say the number one thing, having this conversation with you and talking about my career, is probably my ability to adapt, to just adapt in general, and of course to new environments quickly. This is only my 6th year racing, and to be this far along in the sport, further than I'm very fortunate, because a lot of people don't get this opportunity, right? And that's another thing that drives me, is because I know there's a lot of people out there don't get this opportunity, and that's why I want to make the most of it. And on top of that, I think that's what's gotten me here, though, is making the most out of each opportunity, I run every lap like it's my last, for better or for worse. That's why sometimes there might be a mistake in there from getting that extra, 101% instead of 100%.
That's why you have the sheet metal.
Yeah, exactly. And that's probably just the biggest thing that stands out to me. And I think that's been shown more than ever this year with no practice and no qualifying, because most people would suspect a veteran or some of the guys who've been in this series for years to be the most competitive this season because of the experience they have in the cars and at these tracks. And I'm pretty proud to say I've run up front and beaten a lot of those guys. So that's pretty cool. And I think that, like I said, kind of falls back on just picking up on things quickly and just staying ahead.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great answer, by the way. That's great.
Yeah, adaptability is good. So I want to hit, because I know we're kind of getting towards the end, but I want to hit on I don't know if you've listened to our podcast before. We love like an interesting bag question. So we've got 2 bag questions. We've got one badass bag question, and then we've got an interesting, what's most interesting. So everyone kind of has that badass bag that they can. It's like a self-reliance, things that you've accomplished, things you've overcome, something that when the going gets tough, you can look back and think, well, I did that, I got this. Is there anything that stands out that, a milestone that you've hit that you rely on as a bit of like a self-confidence booster, something that like a little light in the darkness sometimes?
Yeah. I think, my whole career, like getting to this point, I solely believe that I've been very blessed and have had the right tools to succeed as far as the people around me, the equipment I've had to work with. But a lot of hard work. I mean, way more than I think a lot of people could ever even imagine has gone into getting to this point. So, I think I live my life by each day. I just want to go to sleep at night knowing that there's nothing I could have done differently or better. And if I didn't do something right, fix it the next day. And just going 100% all the time is how I live. And that's how I approach racing. As I said, every lap like it's my last. And that's probably the biggest thing. Is I feel like that's what's helped get me here, and to have the opportunity to have someone like Richard Childress, the same guy who hired Dale Earnhardt and who Dale drove for up until he passed away, hire me and want me to drive his race cars. I mean, 25 years ago, my parents flew down from New York to go to the Coca-Cola 600 at Charlotte Motor Speedway, and they visited RCR as race fans. So that was 4 years before I was even born. Now I'm walking through that very same race shop with my name on the race cars. And I feel like that is motivation in itself, because
it's almost a destiny. It's almost like a destiny.
Yeah, I just have a different perspective than a lot of guys, and maybe even a different appreciation. And when I walk into the racetrack, I'm almost still a fan. Like, wow, I'm at Daytona, and then I'm racing. It's just unbelievable. It's hard to describe. It's surreal. And same thing when I drove for Dale Jr.'s team. I think those things, that people like that believe in you. A lot of people, I think everyone in the world doubts themselves at times, or when the going gets tough, it's hard to stay focused. But I always just try to remind myself that there's a lot of pretty amazing people, including my family and my partners, that believe in me. So that's what keeps me going every single day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Love
now,
it.
our second bag question is, everyone who plays a sport, even if it's racing, boxing, doesn't matter, everybody has a backpack, right? You're always going to bring a bag, whatever your gear is in, might be a big hockey bag, whatever it is. What is the most interesting thing in your bag that you always have every day, race day, game day, practice day, whatever? What is the most interesting thing that you've got to have in that bag that is unique to you?
Oh man, that's a hard one to answer.
We've heard a lot of different answers.
Dude, my backpack's heavy when I go to the track. Okay, well, this year, number one is Purell. Obviously, hand sanitizer is number one. That's probably not even a weird answer, but Dude Wipes. And this is not a sponsor plug because they are a sponsor of mine, but Dude Wipes always in the bag. I got a big box from here, and I always stock them back up, throw some extras in my backpack. Okay. That's probably the most unique.
I like that.
That's the first time we've heard that too. So we always hear an original answer. We've heard knee straps, like knee. We've heard knee massagers. we've heard a bouncy ball, like literally
A lot of
everything.
weird things.
I do always have a lacrosse ball to roll my feet out and a foam roller for before the race. Those two things I always have, but I figured that those weren't strange enough. So
I like the dude wipes, and we got to get them
good
on our show because I like just think the name dude wipes.
yeah.
yeah, dude wipes. If you're listening, if you're gonna hop on, dude wipes. We can do some sponsorship.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'll just close with this last one, and that is whatever sport it is, you've obviously been incredibly successful in a short amount of time. What advice would you give to, let's say, a young high school athlete or a young high school student, middle school, high school, about how to be successful or finding what they want to do in life and pursuing it? What advice would you give?
I'd say that if you find something that you really believe in and love, then to be persistent and not give up, even when it gets tough, because giving up is a million times easier than being persistent and continuing to work hard and get better. And, I feel like for myself in particular, I've not only proven myself wrong, but times have been tough and I've pushed through them, and there's an incredible opportunity that's come along at the other side, at the end of the tunnel or on the other side. So just to keep working hard and having faith all the time and praying that things come around, because I think good things happen to good people and hard work doesn't go unnoticed either. So sometimes don't be envious or jealous either of those, because there are some people that maybe you think or know don't deserve it as much, and you don't have that same opportunity. But I think if you're persistent, you will get that opportunity, and the next step's just to make the most of it every time you're able to go out there and perform.
Absolutely.
That's phenomenal. Well, look, we know, first of all, we want to thank you for being on the podcast with us. Number one. Number two, we know you got a lot more growth, a lot more success coming. So tell our audience how they can follow you, how they can learn what you're doing and follow your races and follow your wins and learn more about you.
Yeah, so everyone can check me out at Anthony Alfredo. It's just my name on all mainstream social medias. And I think everything's verified. So if it's not, it's a fake. And then my website's anthonyalfredo.com. And there's merchandise, my schedule. You can see my list of partners and a whole bunch more on there. So that's pretty much where you get all your information. And if anyone's got any questions, I always try to get back to and respond to everyone who reaches out to me as well, whether it's through the DMs or email or whatever.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And again,
we'll be watching.
Best of luck. And you got Richfield backing you, man. We're all supporting you. And we always ask for this commitment. When you win the Cup Series, come back on the podcast with us and share a little bit more. How about that?
Absolutely. It sounds like a deal.
Yeah.
All right.
When you're at the top of the mountain, that's what we want to hear from you next.
That's
perfect.
Right. That's right. Well, you're climbing quick. So keep it up, Anthony. And again, we appreciate you being on, man. And we'll get in touch with you about when this launches and stuff, and we'll go from there.
That sounds great. Thank you.